Hello again, everybody, and welcome inside the Howitzer and Buzzsaw Show. I am George the Howitzer Gerbo.
And I am Mike, the Buzzsawsty.
Sports Talk back with you as we make our way through August and into football season, specifically college football season, which comes up first, which will
You
be
smell that
our.
in the air? That's football in the air right there.
I
You can smell football in the air.
I I respect everybody that is all
It's in the
gung
ether
ho.
here.
I become admittedly more of a summer person in the last few years,
Oh,
so
I'm a
I will
big
be.
summer guy, but football's in the air nonetheless.
Football's in the air nonetheless. I will be holding on to uh, baseball in the last vestiges of summer and some getaways here and there as much as I can as college football season starts for both of us here in the
Right.
coming weeks as we try and figure out this new landscape, Mike, which we will try and break down parts of it and some of the machinations of what's going on in college football here on this edition of the HBS. A reminder to find us wherever you get your podcast, search Howitzer or Howitzer Buzzsaw to find us there. And also shout out to Kellen B. Conley, whose music you hear right here each and every time on the HBS. Check out his work at hyphennation.com.
And as this show begins with Kellen's theme of champion for the Howitzer and Buzzsaw show, we will eventually crown a new champion in the college football world as, yes, they continue to embark on this new era of the sport, the new playoff format, maybe another one coming on the horizon yet again that certain conferences are already trying to bring up and discuss. And you can also find us throughout social media at Gerbo3, at Howitzer Buzzsaw for the show handle, and at Mike Osti11 for myself. And as much as I do enjoy the summer months, even though this was a very different and very busy summer for me, I didn't really get the relaxation that George got this summer, unfortunately. That football is in the air, football is on the horizon, the schedule is dictating it's going to be football very, very soon. And that is why this one will be wall to wall college football here on this edition of the Howitzer and Buzzsaw Show.
Let's get started with college football, the Associated Press preseason top 25.
They just won't stop doing this. They won't stop doing it.
An estimation, a barometer. Man, we are in a
I'm still Mister. I want to get rid of preseason polls, but the AP is still.
Listen, you've gotten your wish in your
Big
league.
12,
Big 12 has gotten rid of it because God.
Yeah, they heard me and they don't let me vote anymore. So they got rid of the one that I was voting in.
Team that
I
was
don't have
last.
the AP vote for the market.
Arizona State won the thing, went to the playoff, and so they're like, well, this is moot now. Big Ten hasn't done one for years. There's an informal, unofficial one conducted by the Cleveland Plain Dealer, Cleveland.com.
Well, there's unofficial Big 12
ones in the Big Ten, but the Big Ten hasn't done it for a while. The Big 12 abandoned theirs this year, but we still have the AP. Shout out to the AP. 100 years they've been doing the poll since 1936. And for the first time in those 100 years, which is kind of hard to believe, and I had to read it multiple times and really? Texas, number one team in the poll, closest margin.
Yeah, preseason especially. That is really hard to believe.
Yeah, closest margin since 1998 in the preseason poll between numbers 1 and 2. Yeah, Penn State just behind them, Ohio State number 3. But yeah, Texas, the Vince Young years, the Ricky Williams years, all these historical good Texas programs.
Further back,
yeah, you want to go even further back, and they've never been a preseason number one team. Plenty of national championships, never been a preseason number one team. And here they are atop the Steve Sarkisian has them at number 1 here in this poll. Arch Manning and the Longhorns. Penn State behind them, a program that you have experience in following and covering in your line of work, as well as I do from their battles with Maryland over the years. And it's always kind of this, I don't want to say cloud hanging over James Franklin, but boy, if this doesn't produce what Penn State
is, this could be the year.
Hope it should, or believe it should produce. You think uproars are bad there, and we live in this time where your number 3 team is the national champions, who wanted to fire their coach after their final regular season game last year, which of course was a loss to their arch rival Michigan, and then you go on and win the national championship, and so it leaves you with a weird feeling in your mouth. But hey, I'll take the national championship in Michigan this year. So
yeah.
just me. There's some crazy ass Ohio State fans out there that wouldn't. But Clemson number 4, Georgia rounds out the top 5. We'll see how good Clemson looks. Dabo Swinney has got a program back to an elite level in a league that is not elite, behind Kate Klubnik at quarterback there. And as you go down the list, some of the returning programs from last year that were on the fringe, Alabama and Miami, that didn't get into the playoff, they're 8 and 10 respectively in the poll. The highest ranked Big 12 team is the aforementioned Sun Devils of Arizona State at 11. Big 10's got 6 teams in the program. It's top heavy. And then Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana are in the poll toward the lower portion of the program. Southern Methodist, SMU, the highest non-P4 team, group of whatever we're going to call them at this point, but the highest non-P4 team is SMU. Boise State cracks in.
They're in the ACC, so they're P4.
God, thank you, Mike. God,
yeah, their last year started them being P4. Yes,
man, my apologies.
And they got in the playoff actually the first year of them being P4.
That's just stinking garbage. Boise State is the highest non. I looked at that and I'm like, that's something weird about that. Boise State is the highest non-P4 team at number 25 overall. Tennessee at 24. Texas Tech, Big 12, expected to potentially have a good year after all the people they've paid. And I back and forth, Penn State, between Penn State and Texas, Mike. I mean, me personally, again, and that's why you have the beauty of the poll, which has voters from all across the country in representing their regions. We live in this part of the country. I see Penn State and see their games in person and on television on a more regular basis than I see Texas, because Penn State's in the league that I cover, and you live in the same Commonwealth. And I would have given Penn State the edge there, but I can see why it was the closest vote in now nearly 3 decades to begin a college football season, with Texas just edging out the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, you can make either case. I semi like Texas getting the preseason nod simply because they are going to open the year with a tougher non-conference slate.
Yeah.
So if you have a full-on tie, because they were very similar a year ago, they both opened with hype and they both accomplished a successful season. They got in the playoff. They were able to advance. They were on the verge of maybe winning a national championship, even though it did not happen and they did not appear in the national title game. So they were right there knocking at the door. They're both kind of even very similar programs where the expectations are crazy. It's been a minute, but the fan base going into the season is going to expect to be in the national championship game at minimum, or it will be an unsuccessful year. And that is the pressure on those two programs. But Texas will have an opportunity, George, to hold serve if they can open up with a victory, whereas Penn State, and we'll get into what we think of the non-conference schedules later in the show, but just in all reality, Penn State is going to run through the out-of-conference schedule, and they're not going to have this is the James Franklin problem. They're not going to have anybody say that they're impressing them beyond the preseason hype until midway through the season. And that is what James Franklin's life always is. Every year, he has pretty much a guaranteed path to 10 victories. It's also part of the way they do the schedule, and that they are one of the top programs in the Big Ten. So they have to obviously win conference games, but they're usually a top 3-4 program in the conference. Their fans want to be a top program in the conference. They want to be Ohio State instead of being more of that 3rd or 4th team perennially in the conference. It's been a while since they won a conference title or really got close to doing so. They're not Ohio State. They have not been able to beat Ohio State, Michigan, and you can argue where they fall the last 5+ years in the Big Ten, but they're not going to be able to do anything to improve that mark. If Texas opens up with a victory, they should stay there and coast after week 1, and then we can get into a debate, George. And I kind of like them being in front and starting ahead, because then it can create a debate opening the season. If Texas would open up the year with a close loss, whereas Penn State's playing nothing to open up the season without even a Power 4 game for a while, Texas fans, and we can have a debate like we do on this show and all through social media, and everyone does all across the country. It's part of the fun of covering the sport, that Texas maybe should stay there if they have a quality loss versus Penn State getting really nothing victories. Whereas the reverse would not allow that, is basically what I'm saying. If Texas opened up the year number 2 and Penn State was 1, even if Penn State's not playing as quality of opponents and Texas has that Ohio State game and then they open up with behemoth matchups, then they're not going to jump a team if they don't win. But they may stand pat if they lose by a field goal because they are playing a much tougher opponent, to say the very, very least. So that allows some controversy early in the season, but otherwise you can flip-flop them at 1-2. And as I said to open up the show, and this is always going to be my opinion with every preseason poll, but certainly when you do it nationally and you're the Associated Press, which is obviously a legit outlet that's been crowning champions for a very, very long time, and that's kind of the one spot that we don't have to debate on what programs should claim which championship. Nobody denies the Associated Press poll. That is one poll that if you get ranked number 1 there, that can be something that can be claimed, whereas coaches' polls even, and certainly the other polls, are more up for debate. But in this era, with the transfer portal, not knowing these rosters year to year, having an expanded playoff, having the Power 4 conferences and really the Big Ten and SEC being a step ahead of the ACC and Big 12, and having NIL and the culture the way it is now, and it could certainly change tomorrow, let alone next year and years from now. I do think in all seriousness, we won't do this. We should do away with all preseason polls, including the Associated Press. You could even make an argument, George, that if you really want to get rid of claiming championships and debating who really was a champion and having 6 champions in given years, we should be done with all championship polls aside from just the CFP. If we're all going to agree that we're going to a playoff format, and Ohio State, for example, is last season's champion despite losing head-to-head to Oregon and not even winning a conference, but they won the playoff tournament, which is the NFL, other sports, they all have the playoff tournament. If you get in and win the playoff tournament, you're the champion, even if you didn't have the best regular season. If that's what we're going to do in college sports, we need to probably stop having a team win and then having people get together and vote another team the champion. It devalues the playoff system. It really does. Like, for example, last year, the Wolf ranking that's been going on forever and has crowned champions and added to this controversy, they actually put Oregon number 1.
Oregon, yeah.
Because even though Ohio State won the CFP, they argue, and they are right in this regard, that they split the season, quote-unquote, series because they just do the whole odd body of work. And if you count them as only having that one loss to the eventual CFP champ, they split it because they also beat them. They didn't lose, otherwise, besides to Ohio State, and they won the conference, which some could even argue is equally as impressive in this day and age, that's why they were won. Oregon has not decided to claim the title. They still haven't claimed it, but that's out there. So if you want to get rid of any of that mess, maybe you get rid of the Associated Press poll altogether, get rid of the coaches poll altogether.
Certainly get rid of the,
No, I would be fine getting rid of it altogether.
You want to get rid of it? Okay.
I'm saying that if you don't want to have the CFP devalued by finishing the CFP and having a quote-unquote major selector say, no, screw that, Oregon's the real champ, and then a program be able to claim something that we can debate whether it's legit or not. If you don't like that, you need to get rid of the other polls. That's what I'm saying. You don't really need to have it if we're going to agree to crown the CFP the champion. But what I am saying is, because that's never going to happen, if you keep the other polls, you certainly should not release them until week 6, week 7, week 4 at the earliest. I don't need a preseason poll because with the transfer portal, the program I cover directly, West Virginia, they have 80-plus new players. Nobody knows, including myself, what they're going to do. They could go anywhere from 8 wins to 4, and I wouldn't be surprised. How can you possibly do a preseason poll? These teams are very, very different. Yeah, Drew Aller is still in Penn State, but these teams are still different for the most part. Texas is even different than they were a year ago at the most important position at quarterback. So how can you really do this fairly? So you don't know. You don't know off preseason polls. We've seen too many years now, especially in this era, that a preseason poll, whether it be from a conference or the national poll, be so wrong going into years, more so than it was 30 years ago. So because of that, no more preseason polls. That's where my head is, and I would prefer no polls altogether outside the CFP. But if you have to have the AP poll and have, claims on things that aren't really part of the playoff, then it shouldn't happen preseason-wise. because you don't know with rosters being different. That's where I am. But I like Texas 1. I like Penn State 2. I agree. You can argue either one. I kind of like Texas holding serve because they have the tougher game to open up the year than Penn State kind of playing a cakewalk out of conference wise. And then from then on, it's hard to argue. It's hard to really know. Again, that's why I don't like the preseason bowl. But what'll be interesting to me is if Alabama can really get back in there and not only be good like they were last year, but get in the playoff now with the expanded playoff. Because if not, this may sound crazy, but DeBoer's probably going to get fired if they don't get in the playoff. That's how high the bar is there. They almost got it in last year, but if they have that random Vanderbilt upset loss they have every year and then win games and they don't get in, he might be gone. Their bar is getting in the playoff. Will Miami ever break through and actually get in? Because they're that program with money and a history. They should finally break through, and that would really help the ACC. And then, what does Tennessee do? Do they continue this recent trek after they had so many years where they were kind of off the map? Do they keep this going? Does Ohio State, defend and keep doing this? Do they have that regular season hiccup, or do they keep on doing this? They're obviously a great talented roster that could easily do it again in the playoff. What does their regular season look like? Those are interesting storylines. Oregon, they've been more on the cusp of a national title than probably any program in the country for probably 15 to 20 years. And unless they count the Wolf ranking #1 spot, they don't have one yet. And there's not even one they can kind of try to fake claim. There's nothing there for them. So do they finally break through with the Nike money? That would be another major story. You could argue they have more pressure than anybody because they haven't done it yet and they have all the money. And then Texas Tech, Arizona State, those schools that recently are spending a lot, certainly Texas Tech, but Texas Tech perennially underachieves. They perennially peak at 8 to 9 wins. They are now spending the most in their conference. Does that lead them to a 10-11 win season? That would be what you need to do probably to get in for them. You have to win the conference to get in probably in the Big 12. Because if not, you could certainly argue they've wasted the most money out of anybody in the country from what they've spent. And history-wise tells us that Texas Tech is prone to not achieve what their pocketbook tells you that they are spending to try to make happen. So we will see.
I will cape up for the AP poll. Long may it rain, including some colleagues and friends that are privileged enough to vote into it.
I know people that vote in it. Yeah, I mean, I know people that vote in it, but the AP poll has been part of the controversy. It's crowned different teams champions than the current system that we agreed to over the years. It has not tried to do it as much in recent years, but there is no factual evidence that suggests the AP poll is any better than any other poll, despite the branding of the Associated Press.
Correct.
What I'm saying is, if you do not want to have multiple champions in a given year, which nobody really wants this anymore. But if you don't want that, you need to get rid of this. You're not getting rid of the CFP.
Well, but the AP hasn't gone, off the top of my head here in this BCS/CFP era.
No, in the BCS era they did, not
in the BCS era, but the AP hasn't gone now in the early date. 2014 is the first CFP, so we're talking a decade here. That the team that's won the college football playoff has been the national champion, correct? I can't think of any instances where that hasn't been the case. Now, to your point, back in the day when there wasn't a system, it wasn't even the system. This was the arbiter. And now we've got Mike.
No, but even in the BCS, there were multiple years where the Associated Press would try to argue somebody else.
Yes,
and sometimes a team that wasn't even in the BCS title game, which is part of the issue.
Yes,
it really that's part of how we had to get rid of the BCS.
Sure.
I didn't mind the system, but you had so many years with co-champions that it just looked ridiculous.
Yeah,
so
and the BCS was flawed in that aspect where it took so many things into consideration and spit out a number and only allowed 2 teams in. So now with the CFP, it's still, you could argue, well, this is the discussion for another show, and I know we love having it, but you could argue that if you took the BCS, and there's an account on social that does this, and I forget the name, so I apologize for not giving it credit, but that takes the real-time results of the polls and everything going on in college football this year, last year, whatever, and runs it through the algorithm of the BCS. And it generally is pretty close to what the CFP.
It's pretty close. There's been a couple years it's been
put out. Yeah, but the CFP is simply still a poll of privileged people chosen by an exclusive committee.
Yeah,
that doesn't really represent a broad cross section. At least my thing with the AP, at least what the AP tries to do is you try to get one person from each state that has an FBS team in it, and they try to represent a national profile. And generally, most of with the exception of a few people, looking at you, John Wilner, San Jose Mercury News, who's always like 4 rankings off the norm or the average, it generally gets a good consensus of this wide-ranging 130 plus team Division One FBS that we have now.
Well,
on a week-to-week basis.
The only argument for that is that there's more people involved and each state is represented. But the argument against that is, if you go back 100 years, there are many examples and there are books about this that they do believe that people were very biased in their state. Yeah. So you're having somebody vote with a bias. So right there is an issue. My point is, and this is always what I bring up, and this is usually a mic drop to this, in 2007 in the NFL, the New York Giants won the Super Bowl. They beat the New England Patriots. If we have to talk right now on who was the 2007 champion of the NFL, it's Eli Manning, and it's the New York Giants. It's Tom Coughlin as head coach, and Randy Moss does not have a ring. For my opinion, as an educated football person, the very best team that Bill Belichick ever coached and Tom Brady ever played for is the 2007 Patriots, and they did not win. My point is, if you did a Wolf ranking, if you did the Associated Press where they try to do overall body of work, which sometimes I like, sometimes doesn't work, but if you try to do that and we had a poll at that point, because the Giants and Patriots played at the end of that regular season when the Patriots destroyed them. And I guarantee you...
the NFL has a tournament.
But that's what the CFP is trying to be.
College football didn't have a tournament.
No, I'm not talking about the past. I'm talking about what we should get rid of in the future. The CFP is trying to be the tournament. What I am saying is that in the NFL today, here in 2025, we have a tournament, and we had one in 2007, but we have one now. And if you win the tournament, even if your overall body of work isn't better, if the Giants and Patriots played each other 10 times in 2007, the Patriots would have won 9 of the games, probably by 20-plus points each game. But the game they played, the Giants won. So they're the champion, and Moss doesn't have a ring. That's just a fact of life. It sucks, but that's a fact of life. I guarantee this, if there was a Wolf ranking or even an Associated Press poll with people with an opinion that like to do overall body of work in 2007, I would bet a lot of money that it would not have been unanimous, and there would have been some voters that would have claimed the Patriots are the champion of the year as the national champion because their overall body of work was way more impressive, which is factually true. So my point is, we should stop doing that in the future, because the NFL now with their tournament, there is no polling.
Yeah, but
so if you're going to have a poll,
you're doing apples and oranges with NFL and college, though. Your point
college is trying to be the NFL and doing college things, is what I'm saying.
But that's different from the rankings and the champion and the poll thing. Where your point would have more water is that if the 12 seed, if we keep it in our current thing, which may expand, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but if the 12 seed were to win, if the SMU team, which barely gets into the CFP last year, if they're to go on the run and win the national championship, are they the number one team? In a 12-team model, Mike, I think college people and the CFP would argue, yes, they're worthy of being crowned the national champion regardless of who's voting in whatever poll, because they have managed to overcome from their disadvantaged position of being a 12 seed. We beat Penn State on the road. We went to the Rose Bowl and beat so-and-so. We went to the semifinal and beat out whoever, and we went to the national championship and beat Notre Dame. And by virtue of that and winning that gauntlet, yes, they're the national champion. But to your point, if it expands, which is we're heading down a road towards something, whatever that number is, 16, 20, whatever, in an expanded thing where let's say 20 teams get in, then you've got a harder problem naming the team who's number 20, and in a matter of 4 weeks, they're the national champion. Yeah, I get you on that. So the NFL comparison's a bit silly. I get what you're trying to say, but it's strengthened with if you've got a low-seeded team that ends up winning the 4-game, 5-game playoff, are they truly the national champion of that season? That's where I think you may come to a head with how these polls are evaluated and conducted.
Yeah, but I don't agree, because last year, literally a major selector argued against the CFP champion just off of last year. The Wolf rankings I'm not making this up. Wolf ranking claims that Oregon, which is still a major selector, Oregon tomorrow could claim the title tomorrow. They know it's. I'm not
Sure.
joking. They have the ability because the Wolf ranking is claiming is in there as a quote unquote major selector. And you are correct that the way college works, the CFP is what people in most most fan bases, most casual fans view as, okay, why are you guys talking? The CFP is the champ. It's the same thing as the NFL playoffs. But that is not the case in college. All the CFP is a, technically speaking, is another major selector. There's no legal reason why Oregon could not claim that championship right now because they have a major selector that gave it to them. So what I'm saying is that in the middle of this current CFP, we've already seen that problem exist. It would be more likely, obviously, in your scenario. But what I'm saying is it's already happened. And Oregon tomorrow could say, George, we're going to screw everything up that you want, and we're going to claim this title. And they would devalue the CFP of 2024. They would totally devalue it if they did that tomorrow. They could. They're not choosing to do so, but I'm just saying that it is out there for them because we already have that. So the Wolf rankings and those
the
things
difference is, yes, it's considered a major selector, but it's a guy running numbers through an algorithm as opposed to 60 media members voting in a poll. So that's where.
But I guarantee you that even if we don't expand, say for example,
his ranking. So and I'll stick to the difference in terminology. His is a ranking based on a system of numbers he's running it through. His isn't a poll.
I understand that, but the NCAA
is literally a poll. You're polling people and asking them to give you a response.
But what you want is what I would be fine with, but that is a whole nother argument of you would like the NCAA to get rid of the quote unquote major selectors. They have not done so.
I would. I think
they have not done so.
Yeah,
they have not.
If you're going to go down the road where we just had Auburn this week claim 4 more of these titles, then yes, maybe it's time to either discredit or invalidate
one of the ones that
anybody at home can make an algorithm with all this information and stats and data publicly available to them going back decades.
I understand, but what I'm saying is
we'll create the HBS ranking, like we'll do our own thing, like what
I am just saying that there. Well, but I understand. But Mina Kimes could make an algorithm in the NFL, and she's not You know why she's not doing so? It would devalue the whole league. It would ruin the league.
But again, with the NFL point, the NFL doesn't rank its teams based on numbers like that.
I understand, but I'm saying that they could easily. They could easily do it.
You don't need an NFL ranking because we got everybody's. You have a schedule with a common league where everybody's playing. College football's problem is everybody is in different leagues. You're all in this loose confederation.
There's no way.
But everybody is separated.
There is no way from now to the future of the sport to the end of time. There is no way to ever fairly crown a champion in college football. There are way too many teams. The schedules are not balanced.
Correct.
The conferences are not balanced.
It's nationwide.
That's why I jokingly, but I'm even serious, that you can make an argument that there has never been that everything's mythical and there's never been a legit champion in the history of the sport. You could argue that because even with the CFP now, which is what I'm bringing up, people say, well, no, that was before 2014. I'm arguing that even now you could argue mythical champs because you have other major selectors still doing a different thing. What I am saying to you is even in the year, because you bring up Auburn adding 4 more, and there are some that think they have 2, there's some think they have 7, some that think they have 9. So even what they had before was controversial, by the way. But adding 4 more to what most people agreed to what they had prior, that includes the 2004 year in which they went undefeated. But it was literally, George, because that was when we were, younger, that when we were in high school, that was a national story beyond sports that they complained so loud that they did not get in that championship game that year. And now 20 years later, they're basically saying, yeah, I mean, we were really mad then, but no big deal. Let's just fix it. We're just going to claim it anyway. And the Associated Press and the coaches poll both had them number 2. At the end of the year, the final rankings, which means they weren't number 3, they were number 2. So if they're going to claim a final ranking of number 2 as a championship, that does devalue the Associated Press over the 100 years of the poll. That is what I'm saying. The AP never said they were the champion, and they're basically saying, AP, middle finger to you. We're putting it on the stadium. We don't care what you do. I'm just saying that the thing about the AP being above everybody doesn't exist as much anymore. It's been devalued too many times with co-champions. I do think you have biases involved way too much. We're young, we're in our 30s. I'm fully a fan of 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds being a part of the AP voting process. But when you get that involved, you're getting people that just recently graduated from the school they're covering, sometimes for outlets that aren't as legit as others, and now they have an AP vote. a lot of the times, we know how this works. A lot of times because they are friends with somebody that previously worked somewhere that gives it to them. Sometimes someone just hands it to them in general. Sometimes they get it because they get hired by a job that the guy who had the job before had the vote and they just pass them the vote.
Yep.
It's not like, I think people have a misunderstanding that every single AP voter is the top journalist of the market. That is not the case.
No.
And no
It
shade
is in
being
some
thrown.
places, but not, yeah.
Like, I will tell you right now, and I'm friends with the kid, the kid that has the West Virginia AP vote.
I just found out about this recently, yeah.
He has only been covering West Virginia
4 or 5 months, right?
Yeah, 4 or 5 months of he's never covered the program prior.
Yeah.
He goes to me for the history of the sport in text all the
Yeah.
time. He got the vote because the guy who had the job before, who also is not as experienced as me and he is younger, gave it to him because he no longer works at the job, and then he took it and the outlet just decided to give it to him.
Yeah.
And also, if you want to pull the curtain back further, and I would be bringing this up whether I was a part of digital media or not, that you generally have to work for a newspaper to get this vote. But I will tell you that the top journalist of a lot of these markets, including Pennsylvania, not even just West Virginia, including the Penn State beat, for example, is not at a newspaper.
Yeah.
If you're going to have so much digital media, including the Athletic and national outlets, and obviously I cover with one, you got to soften off of that. The AP voter should not just be, oh, it's a guy at a newspaper that we just, oh, whoever had the job before gives it to him. You have to tighten up how you're handing this vote if you're going to be that serious with it.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
The people that, I mean, I will say the top, if I was going to do this fairly in terms of, say, the West Virginia coverage,
the guy in the West Virginia press corps that I would give it to is online primarily, came from newspapers, but is online primarily and has been for like a decade. So,
yeah, I know who you're referring to. And what I was going to say is that I would say, because also the issue is you don't want to have repeat voters, people that had it years ago, they don't want to give it to them again. They don't want to have the same guy.
Sure.
The same guy's not supposed to have it several years in a row. So we'll see what happens in the future with this. But I would say that the top three people that should have that vote
are all digital.
The top three people that should have the West Virginia vote who never had it before, that are not 70 years old, and I will say I'm one of them. It's the other guy you mentioned and Keenan Cummings.
Yeah.
And by the way, George, all three of us are disqualified from having a chance at having it. So that I don't know what's going to happen when this current vote is up for grabs, because there's not that many newspapers that cover the beat, and if you can't have a repeat voter, they're going to have to give it to one of us.
They should be able to move it because they take people from TV and radio.
I know, but they don't take digital outlet. They will not.
The digital thing is interesting. Our voter in DC is digital. A couple people television. They're actually WVU alumni. I'm not sure if she's still voting on the poll, but she was at television in the Carolinas voting on it. So, yeah, I think it's okay and fair to have more scrutiny of who the people are. That are.
But I would be fine getting rid of the AC poll altogether. I'd be fine getting rid of it altogether.
Yes, I know that's you.
I don't think it serves a purpose outside of you like it because it's historical. It does not.
Not historical, but it gives besides the whole debate culture and blah blah blah. It gives us this barometer. We don't. Back to your NFL thing, which I
I'm just saying
disagree with. It's the NFL. The NFL is 32
It's just
teams.
Their opinion, though.
In a league that's organized. I don't need a poll of who's the best NFL team because the NFL system will figure that out for me in the way they play the games.
Yeah, but there are years that if you're going to say who was the best NFL team, it's not the Super Bowl champion.
But I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the system in the playoff gives everybody a chance to figure that out. You get in the tournament and you figure it out. College football historically has not had the tournament. We're in a relative infancy in the history of the sport with this tournament and trying to figure out, and the dang tournament keeps friggin' changing from 4 to 8 to now we're at 12 and we're going, wherever the heck we're going light speed next, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But it gives a barometer in an unwieldy thing where teams and leagues and conferences and alliances and loose confederations have changed across the century.
But it's a barometer that's
in the history of the sport.
Yeah, but the problem is, and this is separate from the NFL conversation and comparison, it's a barometer that in this era is impossible to be accurate on, because we have a transfer portal with so many new players in and out. So whether I had the vote or you had the vote or whoever has the vote, I would have this exact same stance that there is nobody who knows with enough certainty to do a poll. You're
Sure.
giving a barometer with this accuracy of the barometer you want would have made sense in a prior era if we maybe had a playoff back then. But now with the play with having a playoff and having the transfer portal, and this is not me complaining about the transfer portal. I'm not even
Sure.
against it, but having the transfer portal, the rosters are too different. You don't know what happened last year has no bearing on this season.
Yeah, correct.
You could argue, but the preseason poll in the AP
is always
bared off of last year.
You're bearing off last year, and you're trying to make
really in the NFL. The rosters do not change year to year as much. There's a lot of change, but not as much. In the college football, every single player can be and this is part of the issue, can be a free agent twice a year. In the NFL, you can't. Obviously, you have a contract. If you even have a 1-year deal, it's only once a year. You can't do it twice a year, and that is the other issue with the transfer portal. But because of being able to be a free agent twice a year, and because of the portal, is part of the crux of my reasoning to get rid of all the other polls. The coaches poll too. I know some coaches put a lot into that. I know a lot of coaches do not put a lot into that.
Yeah,
and I know a lot of coaches who are very biased.
Same as some of the media.
True, but here's the difference. I've seen a coach fill it out, and the time he put in is half the media member put in, and it's very biased. So I could argue that somebody working for the program of any ilk, coach on down, is more biased than a media member. Sometimes you give the media member the benefit of the doubt, but it's all still biased. It's all still opinion.
Sure.
Because of the portal, the barometer is not a good one. Is all I'm saying.
Implicit or explicit. I would still rather have both the AP and the coaches than just have to wait till week 8, or even if they did a one from the beginning of the season, 20, 25, however big the committee is now, people that are selected that don't have any, there's no democratization of that. It's whoever the committee selects, and these people are voting on it. We are trusting them. We're trusting that these voices are better than whatever convoluted thing we did with the BCS.
We just can't always do that because we've had those voices lead us astray in the past.
Yeah, but that's who you want doing the poll is just the CFP, and so that's what the CFP is.
But that's what I'm saying. If you're going to have,
I appreciate the coaches. Same thing. I know coaches that put a bunch of time in it and coaches that don't put a bunch of time in it. Right. I appreciate having the number and having their perspective. And I appreciate the media members, some of whom I know put a lot of time in, and some who just kind of resort everything from last week. And if somebody lost, they drop down. If somebody wins, they move up.
I guess here's my issue.
I appreciate having them as just kind of, guardrails a little bit. Don't take them as gospel. Don't take the number that's next to a team in the poll as, oh my God, they are number 5 and so-and-so's number 6. You don't have to take it that way. But I think it's good to have those voices in the conversation and not just the voices of the CFP.
And if everybody took it as only a barometer, maybe it wouldn't matter. But I think where we differ here, separate from the NFL example, and in the beginning of the season, that is the case because now, and this is more current than it was even early days in the CFP when we were still figuring it out, the AP poll in particular, the coaches poll and the AP poll are often similar, but the AP poll and the CFP are often very different. So the CFP obviously doesn't release theirs until the season gets underway.
Yeah.
And that's
late
more
in the season.
Yeah, late. I mean, a lot of that is for TV and marketing and things like that. They're trying to make you wait for their special CFP poll that they don't want to give it to you too much. It's like an attraction type of thing. But they are very, very different. But what I am saying is if everybody took the AP and coaches poll, and maybe this is my last point here, if everybody took those polls as only a barometer, and that is it, it wouldn't matter whether you do them, don't do them, whether there's a Howitzer and Buzzsaw poll, it wouldn't matter. However, if we're going to have a situation that includes 2024, so we're after it, not saying hypothetically it could happen in 20 years if we expand or 5 years if we expand, but it just occurred. If we're going to have a format that still allows people to claim things that they did not accomplish, then that is my issue. I know people at the NCAA that want to get rid of 100% claiming across the board from blue bloods on down. If you want that, what I am saying is you need to get rid of the other polls. At minimum, you need to take off of the tag that says major selector. Take it away. And then if they're putting it together, that is on them to do as people in the world. You can't tell somebody not to run a website. fine. But if you keep the little clarifier that says major selector, and George, there is an actual, the NCAA website actually is more accurate than what a lot of people try to claim and what exists. They have it all down. And sometimes there are more champions in certain years, and they have about 6 or 7 major selectors. And they, if a major selector claims it, they put the team there. This does not include some of the
there's
claim
nearly a
titles
dozen in some instances over the course of time. There's been like a dozen major selectors,
and that's changed over. Yeah, that's changed over the years. But what I'm saying is, yes, some are off mathematical equations. Some are off the Associated Press, and people have to have obviously a legit job to be there. It's not like an average fan. Some are, if you win the CFP or if you won the BCS, you automatically get it, even if maybe the poll doesn't put you there. The coaches, George, you can get a number 1 rank off just the coaches poll, and I think we would agree there's bias there. You can, if you have number 1 in the coaches poll, but number 2 in the AP, and you don't win the CFP, you could claim a national title. You could do it off the Wolf rankings. You could even try off the Colley Matrix, which is the least legit of them all. But there are people that have claimed this, and there's even evidence to support that even sometimes the algorithm polls, the Colley Matrix, the Wolf rankings, there are people that believe that sometimes they were intentionally tweaked to just screw up the system in given years. If you really want to go down a rabbit hole, because I will put these 2 things out there, George, for anyone listening or even yourself. I don't know if you've studied this as much as me, who can do a whole. I can do a whole.
I know you have studied it.
Well, what I'm saying is I can do a whole documentary on just this. We can do a 10-hour show on just this. So what I'm asking you is, when's the last time Notre Dame has won a national championship?
Oh, geez. 88.
Right. That's correct.
Yeah.
If you ask the Colley Matrix, it's 2012. That's what I'm saying. And the Colley Matrix tells you they are the national champion of 2012. Guess what happened that year? They played in the national championship game, and they got mollywopped by Alabama. And after the game was over, the Colley Matrix got together, and they didn't have a share. They put them 1 and Bama 2. They could claim it tomorrow. They don't. They don't. But what I'm saying is, as long as you have those things in existence, I think the easier fix is, and it may suck for our colleagues and a historian of the sport, but the easier fix is if the NCAA is not going to fix itself, because they never do. The easier fix is take all the other polls away. They're gone. They're gone. No legitimacy to any of them. You're all gone. We're doing a CFP. If you write down you want to do the CFP, we're all agreeing to one format. We should align ourselves to get in the same amount of conference games in every Power Four. That's not the case now. But if we want to get everything as aligned as possible, like all the pro sports, and we're paying players now, we're really a pro sport, then we're done with all of this mess. If it's just a barometer, like you're saying, that you're going to say you disregard the Colley Matrix as a joke, which it really is. But what I'm saying, George, if it's just disregarded as a joke unanimously, cool. It is not disregarded as a joke unanimously. That is my problem. That is my problem. There is a championship on a press box just from the Colley Matrix.
Yes.
So as long as we have that as our world, you need to get rid of the other ones. You can't just keep them because they're a barometer, is what I'm saying. We have people running too much of a muck. That is my issue. But especially preseason wise, we'll see how close these really are. I imagine that most of the top 10 will still certainly be in the mix, but we will really see what happens. And we're never going to get rid of the other polls altogether, but we're not going further away from claiming. We're going closer to claiming.
We got to launch this.
We're not going further away. We're going closer.
We got to launch this HBS. We'll just do a top 10, just HBS college football top 10. We take mine and yours, average them together, and see what we.
I mean, George, you have to understand, I was at a press conference a couple years ago covering West Virginia. And obviously Neil Brown didn't get in the AP poll all those 6 years, first time for West Virginia in half a century, and as bad as that was.
Yeah.
But there was somebody in the national media who was at one of the presses, because it was before the season going into the Penn State game.
Oh, I remember this.
For that.
Yeah.
And somebody asked one of the assistant coaches, how are you motivated by not having been ranked yet in a major poll? You want to achieve that, etc. And this coach looked that person dead in the eye and said, "I'm sorry, you're wrong. We were ranked 25th in the coaches poll going into the season." That media member complained to West Virginia after the press conference, and nothing ever came to it outside of West Virginia continued saying, and they were ranked 25th
They
in
were
the
ranked
coaches
25th
poll.
in the coaches at one
So
point.
they're not using, that was not a barometer there. That was a literal argument between a Power 4 and a national media member
Yeah.
and they put it on every graphic imaginable. So if you want to be a barometer, cool, but the programs are not using it as a barometer because that's not even getting into claiming national championships. They're worrying about who's 25th and who's 24th and who's 26th. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But yes, the CFP releases later. The AP poll is more serious, but they need to get more modern with the times in terms of how media works.
Yes.
They're disqualifying some of the best media members in certain markets. Certain markets do have different rules, as you're talking about with digital media. I think we need to get a system where every market, you're all in the same country, same rules to digital media, same rules to games played in conference play, same rules to what poll we're going to agree to. All the Power Four SIDs should all get together and say, what are the polls we're looking at? Is it the AP, coaches, and CFP? Is that it? Do we all agree? If we don't, what other one do you want to put in? And no, it can't just be another one that's crazy just because you want to claim something. We need to come to a consensus. That's what you want in your butterfly rainbow world. That's not where we are. I'm just saying until we get there, because I have no confidence we will ever get there, we might as well just do away with everything else and just do the one system.
Not in football. Yeah.
If we can do what you want, where it's only a barometer and nobody claims anything, then fine. We're just not there. I have no confidence in us being there. But yes, the AP poll preseason poll is out. You can take it for what it is. I do think in this era, it is less legitimate because of the transfer portal, if nothing else.
Should there be more teams in this said bracket, tournament, poll, whatever you want to call it? We will discuss that and more after this quick timeout here on the Howitzer and Buzzsaw show.
All right, and you just want to take a, 30 seconds and cut it out, or
hit pause on there real quick.
I was trying to find that. I can't find pause. I think maybe because I streamed it. Yeah, it's because I streamed it. Can't pause it. So.
Okay.
All right. Whenever you're ready, I have. Okay. All right.
Welcome back inside the Howitzer and Buzzsaw show. George, the Howitzer Gerbo.
Mike, the Buzzsawsty.
Part 2 of our college football discussion preview. I'm going to call this meandering conversation. They all tie together. Everything in the stinking sport ties together.
It does. Part of the issue with rankings is schedules are not even, in which is where we can segue.
Yeah,
100%.
It will be one of the more interesting one of the more interesting seasons. If last year in the first year of 12 teams was interesting, this year 2 of a 12 team, but also as you've got so many of these schools pivoting from scheduling, I don't want to say difficult, but just peer opponents in terms of non-conference Power 4 games. Indiana, who had the Virginia Cavaliers on the schedule, got out of a series with Virginia. Like what's big, God bless
Yeah, it's
UVA.
not like they're getting out of the Alabama series that West Virginia's trying to get out of. We're talking about Virginia here, who is
shout out to
they've been
Morgan.
okay recent years, but like
Trying to get out of that. Did get out of that series, and Kurt Signetti, rightfully so, saying, "Hey, listen, I'm just trying to schedule an SEC schedule."
Yeah.
He's right for the most part. Some teams have,
funny.
some differing things here or there. Penn State's got a, weak top to that schedule. I think Nevada is the most difficult opponent on that schedule. They've got D2 Villanova in there, but you still have some of these teams, Mike, that are scheduling these games that we've been, historically used to. I can remember we've been talking about, AP polls and all that. I still remember, the kickoff weekend, in the late 90s, West Virginia played Ohio State, like these big made for TV, admittedly, type of matchups.
It used to be that week one, everybody played a top tier opponent. Then you got into the early BCS where everybody played an FCS. Everyone wanted to get that first win. Now it's more all over the map. And now we're getting into everyone kind of wants an easy game, except for certain schools. But the traditional non-conference rivals that were even non-conference rivals before we got into conference realignment recently, Notre Dame and USC, for example. Notre Dame's never been in a conference, but they always had a rival with USC. I've already had multiple national media members, George, tell me they predict that to go away because it's not advantageous to play it any longer.
Well, yeah, and so
they're going to get rid of a lot of those matchups even more than we've seen, and certainly not early in the season because of gigantic risk there. But as I talked about earlier, that's why you do give credence, and why if I'm in a tie-breaking scenario like we're talking Texas and Penn State, I'll bump Texas for just playing Ohio State. If that's the only reason I have, that's what I'll do. And that's why I argued, and we'll have this argument after week one, the loser of that game, you could absolutely argue, should not fall off to where they are now, and could certainly still argue as being ahead of Penn State if it's Texas, because Penn State's opening up with nothing. And they're doing it off of the system, but you also have to give credit to teams who are playing tough games.
And I'll pose the question to you, as a perfect segue. So you still have some of these remnants of these games, and also college football, as the NFL has continued to encroach where it can into schedules left and right, including the NBA's and college footballs. Now that college football has the playoff and those games are going later, and the NFL is like, well, too bad we play on Saturday. And there is a very antiquated broadcast television agreement and old things in there that kind of kept that the way it is, which is why you hadn't seen NFL games going up against college football games on the same Saturday. The playoff is new and modern and different. But that's to be said. All that being said, the college football still has that Labor Day weekend and can play games on Friday and Saturday and Sunday and Monday of that weekend as a showcase for itself, because the NFL hasn't decided to back up its schedule. It was years ago, earlier in September. Now it's not. But so you've got a few of these matchups in here. Tigers versus Tigers, LSU and Clemson. Clemson's got a very tough top of their schedule in their first 4 weeks. First 5 weeks for their games are against Clemson, against LSU, against Georgia Tech, Syracuse, which was a good team last year and returns a couple of highly touted quarterbacks in their quarterback room, and then Bill Belichick in North Carolina right after that to begin the month of October. You mentioned Notre Dame. Notre Dame and Miami will open up their season in week one together. The classic Catholics versus convicts rivalry. It's lost a little bit of its step from those Jimmy Johnson and Lou Holtz days in the 80s. Howard Schnellenberger in there as well. But that rivalry is still on schedule. And then, of course, as we kind of let off with talking about Texas, the number one team in the country, is an underdog as they go to Ohio Stadium on the
they're playing the defending national champion,
playing the defending national champion Buckeyes. So I agree with what you were kind of saying there and referencing other people's opinions, but I think there's still there may still be a place for these type of games, solely because as this expands, it is less penal. Meaning that
Ohio State, and they didn't get penalized last year. They ended up winning a national title despite having a tough week one game, and then they even lose to Michigan at the end of the year.
Not only can you still get in the tournament, heck, you may still be able to get in your conference tournament because of how round robin it is. In the Big Ten, there's no divisions anymore. ACC, similar setup. So I think that you still may see these type of games, but fortunately or unfortunately, it's probably only going to be the cream of the crop.
Yeah, that's the
Ohio
difference.
State,
That's the difference.
Michigan kind of sneaks under the radar here. They play a lot of these weird games. They play like Hawaii and some of these teams early. So Michigan never really schedules tough.
Yeah, the
out of
weird they won
conference
national
early.
title, their schedule was easy.
Ohio State's always really
Yeah.
Ohio State played Oklahoma, Baker Mayfield planted the flag in Columbus.
Right.
They played Virginia Tech. The years Virginia Tech had good teams, home and home, in Blacksburg and in Columbus.
Yeah.
Texas is willing to do these things. Notre Dame, of course, not in a conference fully, but they play the limited schedule with the ACC, so they have some flexibility to do what they want. Some of the SEC teams, LSU, as I just mentioned, Florida State, Clemson, they'll play some of these big early season games. But beyond that, you're probably not going to see, as West Virginia is trying to get out of their matchup, their home and home with Alabama, you're not going to see that next tier, the West Virginias of the world, the Kansas states of the world, the Oklahoma states of the world, trying to, why, for what, put up this big matchup against a top 10 program just to say you did. That I think probably is not something that's going to persist, but you may still see the very, very top, those kind of top 10 blue blood programs, as you like to call them, in these last couple of years, still may have that opportunity to play those games early in the season. But for the rest of the country, like Indiana bailing out of a simple P4 matchup against UVA, you might not see that continue down the line in some of these middle and lower tier teams in these conferences.
And that's what we've had in recent years, that the blue blood teams are willing to do this. And the difference also is the Ohio States of the world, they can get forgiven for a win or a loss early in the season. Certainly if the loss is to a Texas, a good team, because of the playoff, because of the system now, and because of their who they are. The West Virginias of the world, that historic program, but not nearly a blue blood, not close to an Ohio State level, the Pitts, Marylands, they can't afford hiccups because the committee is going to say you don't, you have that bad loss, whereas they're willing to forgive Ohio State for it because, number one, they know that they're the brand, they bring the money, they're going to maybe be able to get it done in the playoff. They're not going to just throw a bone to a West Virginia because, say, they lost to Penn State, even though it's a really tough game. The last couple of years, West Virginia's had 4 straight years with Power 4 Week 1 games now prior to 2025, where they're going to open up with an FCS game. 3 of those 4 years, they opened up on the road. The one home game was home against Penn State as a top 10 team. As a former West Virginia coach said, and he put this out there publicly, that's just dumb scheduling. I was saying it before everybody else was saying it was dumb scheduling, but I also said it while everyone else was saying it was dumb scheduling, because you're not Ohio State and they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And yes, if you win it, then you could probably afford to drop a game later and you can have a parade and you can brag about it for generations. The likelihood of winning it is so low, it's not worth the risk. And that's what Indiana basically is doing and what Kurt Signetti is doing. He basically is saying that Virginia is not a world beater. They're not a blue blood. They're not even West Virginia's level in terms of history on college football. But why take the risk? If you beat Virginia, yeah, it's a Power 4 win. But if you lose, you're Indiana. You're unlikely to win a Big Ten conference, but you got in the playoff last year without winning the conference. So there's proof in the pudding that you don't have to win the conference to get in. So you just want to be able to get as many wins as possible, use the overall record, whether it's fair or not, and then try to get in that way, even if you're not a conference champ. Whereas if you're stacking losses to good opponents, you're going to get screwed. I have argued that it shouldn't be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. The committee, whether it be the AP voters, the CFP committee, coaches, whoever. These are just opinions that we talked about in the last segment. They could get together and have their opinion be that we're going to reward a strong out-of-conference schedule no matter who you are. They could do that, and it wouldn't get rid of Ohio State having tough games, and it would maybe encourage the Indianas, the Marylands, the West Virginias, the Pitts to have tougher games. But because that's not what they're doing, and I'm not in charge of them, and the world we're living in is they're just rewarding wins, and as long as you get a couple quality games mixed in there, and it's not totally a group of 5 schedule, because then they wouldn't reward you, then they're going to have that be enough for you, and certainly at least certain programs. And if you lose a real quality game it hurts you more than if you beat a team that is a nobody and shouldn't really gain anything for you. So if that's the way it is, then I don't blame Kirk Cincinnati and Indiana for doing what they're doing. They are kind of trying to keep up with the Joneses, which is what I've argued others should do. And George, it even extends to after the backyard brawl when it had a rebirth in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
You went there because Maryland was off as a fan. I was obviously covering it. The pageantry, and that wasn't in West Virginia where it's more of a college atmosphere, but that's the best pageantry that Pitt has ever had at a college game, certainly at a pro stadium. It was a college vibe at a pro stadium.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, set an attendance record that only has been broken by Taylor freaking Swift. So that was a great atmosphere. It was. And even the winner after the game, right after the game, Pat Narduzzi won the game and made it clear publicly, I'm never playing this in week 1 again. That's what he said. It's too tough in week 1. He won it and then basically complained about having to play it. Not the loser, the winner didn't want to play it any further. And that
the loser probably didn't either, knowing Neil Brown at this point. So
he didn't publicly complain about it.
He didn't publicly,
years later. He wasn't mad about playing the brawl week 1. He didn't want to play Penn State in week 1, and he didn't. Yeah. His issue was he didn't want to play 11 Power 4s. Yeah. He actually said he didn't care when the game was. He just didn't want to have 11 Power 4s. But Narduzzi has made it clear he wants an FCS game in week 1 as a tune-up, like the NFL has exhibition games, and then he'll get into the brawl in week 3. Maybe he'll talk about it later. He does not want to ever play that again in week 1, whether they're better or worse. Then it does not matter. He doesn't want to do it in week 1 because it obviously is a coin flip. It's a rivalry game. Mm-hmm. You don't know. He doesn't want to risk it in week 1 because then you got to start 0-1. Even if you're a good team, you're behind the 8 ball. You're not going to get ranked, etc. And I hear him. He's not wrong in that opinion. That having that game does not really benefit two similar programs in Pitt and West Virginia. They're not blue bloods, but there's history there, but they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt from anybody in any committee or any voting body. So it doesn't really benefit them, but it just goes to show when the winner of a game is the one, that's why I brought him up. The winner of the game is saying that he doesn't want to do it anymore. That tells you that it's not beneficial, and that tells you the system is dictating not to do it. So yes, I would prefer strength of schedule to matter in the out of conference as well as the in conference, which obviously the programs cannot totally control, but the schedules are the way it is. So basically the way we're going to likely have this go on in the future, unless there's a catastrophic change, no matter the playoff format, based on how these schedules are looking, the top of the top, the Ohio States of the world, obviously Notre Dame's a different ball of wax because they're not in a conference. You may see them open up years, whether it be in Dublin, whether it be just because they want to have tough games to open up, because they know that if they lose, it's no big deal. It's already been proven. You're going to see them probably still do this, George. But the level below and everybody on down, so really like not even 10, I think maybe 8 programs can get away with doing this. Mm-hmm. Everybody on down, you're going to see a schedule that will probably look very easy to open up a year. There are some more ACC and Big 12 teams that probably are going to have a out-of-conference schedule that looks like an FCS, a group of 5, and then 1 Power 4, because they're obviously not in the top 2 conferences, so they feel like they need to have at least 1 more Power 4 in there to impress the committee. But if you're in the Big 10 or in the SEC, whether it's fair or not, they might have no Power 4s in the out-of-conference, and they might just have a Penn State, a group of 5s, have the FCS game, just run through it, and then all they would tell the committee is, yeah, but we have Ohio State in here. We have Michigan in here. Not every year. You're not going to play every team every year, which is why I think it's a false narrative to say it works every year. Some years it does not work, and some years you get a really easy schedule. Like Indiana last year, they didn't even get a tough conference schedule. They ran through a very easy schedule. But be that as it may, they're going to say there are enough ranked teams and tough games in conference play. We want to get the easier games out of the way earlier. And that's what you're going to see from Big Ten and SEC teams, and that SEC model that did work for a decade, now copied by the Big Ten as well. That's what we're going to see. And the one that you didn't mention is the week 0 game, I believe, that is not Blue Bloods. That is the very first time, and I had to look this up too, but this is the very first time in the history of the Big 12 Conference, from 96 to now, it is the very first time that 2 ranked teams will go head-to-head to open up a season. So whether it's week 0 or week 1, the very first time, and that includes Oklahoma and Texas back in the day to now, obviously different iterations of the conference. The very first time per the conference, the very first time you're going to have that. Kansas State, Iowa State, that to me, that now it's cool, George. That's cool.
Mhm.
But to me, that's dumb scheduling. Dumb scheduling. Because you're going to have a similar program to you that is similarly ranked to you, that you both are not blue bloods, are not getting a benefit of the doubt, don't really have history to back you up, even though occasional successful years. The loser of that game will drop, will have a rough road. It is not fair because the loser of the Ohio State Texas game will likely not drop and will be a mulligan. But the loser of that Dublin game is going to have a rougher road than the winner, even if it's a field goal difference. And that's why I wouldn't do it. That type of game should be later in the year. You're going to play those teams, but adding that on already in a conference that's a crapshoot that anybody can beat anybody is way too risky to do. They should not be doing that, but they are, and it's cool for the fans. But you're going to have the loser of that game is going to be mad several weeks later because they're going to argue, George, and rightfully so. They're going to argue that their overall body of work and out of conference schedule, when we get to week 7 in front of everybody in the Big Ten playing Michigan, Ohio State, and playing Penn State in those tough games, they're going to argue they have a tougher schedule. And they will have a tougher schedule played than Indiana. I almost guarantee it. But they're going to have the loss. Indiana probably will be unscathed. And then it'll be a debate. But they shouldn't have scheduled it that way. I think that is dumb scheduling to me.
And beware beware the week 0, the Ides of week 0, as Florida State found out last year when Georgia Tech walked them off too. So there's always been kind of this weird
right.
Northwestern, that one year, that was the only game they won. They beat Nebraska, and that was the only Northwestern's only win was abroad. It was just in a 1-11 season. So a lot of weird things go on with that Dublin game.
I mean, that Georgia Tech team did turn out to be okay, and Florida State
Yes.
turned out to be horrendous. So it was a shock at the time, but it was legitimized a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Let's wrap up in the same vein as when we're talking about positioning and what hurts and what doesn't hurt. It probably wouldn't hurt if you've got, I don't know, 28 teams that get in. So reports and rumors floated out that the Big Ten had been considering Pete Thamel among those who first reported it.
Yeah.
That in a 28 team CFP pitched by Big Ten and its commissioner, Tony Petitti, that would include as many as 7 automatic bids for the Big Ten and SEC in order just to lump more of these teams in there, is one of these. Interesting that I've read a couple different thoughts on the topic. First of all, idea that shouldn't have got out of somebody's head. First of all, second of all, that potentially it was leaked by someone at the Big Ten.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
In order to either
100%.
purposely quash it or send up the trial balloon and see if it gets popped, which it did immediately.
That was what I think it was leaked by the Big Ten to test it out, and some may like it, but they just wanted to see what the vibe would be. That's why I think that happened. I think they leaked it.
Rare that I'll stand in alignment with the SEC. And this is why, because we all kind of expected, Mike, as we talked about last year before the beginning of the 12, because they had come to an agreement on, hey, let's go to 14, or 16, I should say. So Greg Sankey, SEC commissioner, proponent of the perfectly sensible 5+1 model of 5 automatic qualifying teams, and then 5+11, I should say. Did I say 5+1?
You said
5+11. So 5 automatic bids, 11 at-large bids, kind of similar to what we saw this past year. Petitti wants some ridiculous 4 for the SEC, 4 for the Big Ten, 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12, I think 1 for the best non-P4, and then 3 at larges, which makes no frickin' sense. So that's why we have yet to come to an agreement beyond this season on what a 16-team playoff would look like. And we've had this discussion, going in for many, many years. I will say this about Tony Petitti is that he will not be Big Ten commissioner forever, and the bones of the road to the CFP and realignment are littered with the bones of past commissioners who, including his immediate predecessor, Kevin Warren, who, as much as the league would like to say that he had a fine tenure, and no, it was unceremonious exit, and he ran away to become the president of the Chicago Bears. And now he's trying to do the same BS with the Bears, where they're trying to jack them from Soldier Field and from the lakefront and stick them in Upper Arlington. So Kevin Warren's track record, not good. It's generally not good when all these people are lawyers, that run these things. Petitti's another one's worked for MLB Network, he's worked for CBS. But when you allow their lawyerness, to use a dumb word that's not a word, when you allow their legalities to infiltrate and their own self-interest to infiltrate, as opposed to the interest of the greater good and the sport, while still protecting and advocating for your league, which is one of the top 2 leagues, you can do that and not have dumbass ideas like this come out of your head.
And what is the most interesting to me about the possible playoff format in the future is that Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, who doesn't come from the legal background, he comes from the Brooklyn Nets. He comes from the sports background in terms of what he immediately came from and preceded him before being commissioner of the Big 12. And for me, he's already done a way better job than his predecessor in the conference. But he, not within the top 2 conferences in the country, is a proponent of the 5+11. Brett Yormark himself is a 5+11 guy. To me, he's actually been so public with it, I would almost stamp as him the face of it and not the SEC. He has been very much in favor of the 5+11, and he has vocally said he thinks it's the fairest thing for the sport, and it is a giant risk for the Big 12. So you're saying that somebody needs to kind of walk the line of trying to promote their conference and what's best for their conference as well as the best for the sport. He arguably is not doing what's best for his conference, but yet doing what's best for the sport. 5+11 would be fine and probably is the fairest way to go, especially if you're sticking to this many teams and going to the 16 and not getting crazy with 28, 32 or whatever you go in the future. But it could certainly be a scenario where the Big 12 is going to end up with just the conference champ and have that be it. There were options that were presented to him that he has been public with that would have, at minimum, no matter how they did in the season, no matter what their records were, no matter what schedules looked like, he would have locked in 2 Big 12 teams. It would have got 2 Big 12 teams. A non-conference champion who could have had 3 to 4 losses would have had to get in, and a Big 10 team like, say, Penn State in a given year, or a really good Big 10 team, because now it's loaded with Pac-12 teams too, USC, Oregon, whoever, one of them, below Ohio State probably, would not get in, yet being a much better team. I mean, it wouldn't probably be fair in every single season, but it would have gave more opportunities to the Big 12. But Brett Yormark has said, no, I don't want to do. Now, this is what he says. Maybe he has other motives, but he wants to do just what's best for the sport. So that is amazing to me that is his opinion. It is not that I disagree with it, but it is just amazing that it is his opinion. And all the coaches on down, from Rich Rod to Dion to Mike Gundy, at Big 12 Media Days, once he said this, they all fell in line and we all want 5+11 too. And some of them are arguing things that are not going to help them. They're not going to help them. So he's doing it also as a risk that there's an off chance that the Big 12 maybe could have 3 in a year. So instead of being locked into 2, which would really where they would have been locked into, they could maybe have a 5% chance of 3 in a year, but more likely get a 95% chance of only having 1 every season. So, because unlike the ACC, who you're a very similar conference in, you don't have Clemson that's going to get the benefit of the doubt. Clemson is that blue blood that gets benefit out there. That is the only argument to bump them ahead of the Big 12, maybe, where both conferences are kind of very equal at the middle, etc. But Oklahoma and Texas are not there anymore, so they don't have that blue blood that'll just throw in no matter how they really, really do. They're unlikely to get that second team. So Brett Yormark wants 5+11, and I'm not mad at that. What I argued at the end of this past playoff season, which right after we had the show, then kind of started to be a national conversation, is having the conference champion automatically get the bye to move on and be able to avoid that first game. To me, that's not exactly fair because, and you have conferences that are not created equal. I don't think there's anybody among us, even including people that work for the Big 12 and ACC, that would argue that the SEC and Big 10 are the top two conferences. There are more quality programs there. There are more great programs there. There are more programs in those two conferences that can legitimately win a national championship in any given season. You could argue the bottom of the conference. I think you could argue the bottom of the conference is either similar or worse. You could argue that in a given year that the bottom of the conferences are similar or worse. But both of those two conferences have probably 5 schools that are, generally speaking, top tier programs, and more so than the ACC or Big 12. And we can argue all day on whether the ACC is 3 and Big 12 is 3 or which one's 3 or 4, but they're a step below the Big 12 or the Big 10 and the SEC, and pretty much everyone knows that. Yormark's even talked about how he wants to be the number 3 conference. Like he's given up the fight to be 1 or 2. So because of that, having the Big 12 conference champion, Arizona State last year, or the ACC conference champion, get a SMU, get a bye over a Penn State last year. Like you could have had a scenario last year, George, where Penn State beat West Virginia, but West Virginia wins the Big 12. Penn State does not win the Big 10. And then West Virginia either has a bye and a better seed, or Penn State doesn't get in at all and West Virginia's in. That could have happened last year. That would have been insane. You basically, what I would like to happen, you can have the Power 4 conference champions all get an automatic bid. So it's very similar to the NCAA tournament in basketball. You win your league, you win your conference, certainly at a power level, you're automatically in somewhere. But in college basketball, George, if you win a conference championship, you win the conference tournament, you're not guaranteed a 1 seed. You're not guaranteed a 2 seed. Mm-hmm. You could be any seed in the book. You're guaranteed to get in, but then they look at your body of work. They look at where you are. In all reality, you're going to be a top 4 seed, but you're not guaranteed to be a 1 seed. But in college football, it should be the same way. There's no reason why it should be different if we're going to have a playoff and do it this way. You get in automatically as a conference champ, but then once you get in automatically as a conference champ, then you go off either the CFP rankings or whatever you want to use, and you just rank them that way. So, for example, it's legitimately harder to win the Big 10, win the SEC, than it is to win the Big 12 or ACC. That's just the case. It's harder to do so. So, if you're Penn State and you're a top 10 program, but you're not the conference champion, they may never be a conference champion again, but they're a perennial top 10 program. They shouldn't necessarily be seated worse than a conference champion just because they won a conference if they have a similar body of work, similar ranked opponents, etc. Now, you can get into the weeds and say the out-of-conference schedule is part of why maybe you wouldn't do that, but within the conference, there's still enough there that Penn State's body of work, George, was better than Boise State's body of work last year. Penn State had to play SMU in week 1 of the playoff in the first round. They won, but SMU is a good program, a good team. There's money there. You're risking yourself. You're playing a home game, but you're risking yourself. Boise State could sit pretty, and they had a bye. Now, they gave them a bye, even though they're a group of 5, because they thought they had a better year, and they only were in competition between who would get that bye between them, Arizona State, those schools. Arizona State still got in, but they got the bye. I'm fine with them maybe arguing they had a better year than Arizona State. You could say that. They didn't have a better year than Penn State. Mm-hmm. And Penn State wasn't able to be part of the debate because they weren't a conference champion. So what I'm saying is you be a conference champ, great. That automatically should get you in, even if it's a lesser conference, certainly at the power level. But that's it. That's it. If you win a conference and you got 4 or 5 losses for some crazy reason, Oklahoma State, the 1 year, they were in the Big 12 title game. They lost out of conference games. If that's you and you lose an FCS game and then you're in the Big 12 title game and you win that, great. You're in the playoff. You did a college basketball thing. You're not going to be a 4 seed for me. So you then start ranking it off of body work and off the rankings, and then you do it that way. And if you go by last year, Penn State should have had the bye. Penn State should have got the bye. If you're talking Arizona State, Boise State, Penn State, SMU, if you're getting down to those teams, Penn State had the best resume. And last year, they played a power forward to open up the year in West Virginia. They aren't doing it this year, but they did it last year. So they should have been that team last year. And it's year to year, but you win your conference, you get in, doesn't mean you should have the bye. That's where I am. But outside of that, I'm fine with the 5+11. But it's interesting to me that Brett Yormark, when it doesn't really help his conference, is also a big proponent of it as well.
That will put a nice college football size bow on this edition of the Howitzer and Buzzsaw Show. A reminder to find us wherever you get your podcast. Search Howitzer or Howitzer Buzzsaw. Download, subscribe for free on Apple, Google, TuneIn, and more. Search Howitzer. Shout out to Kellenby-Conley, whose music you hear right here each and every time on the HBS-nation.com. Check it out.
Find us on social at Gerbo3 on social media, at MikeGossi11, at Howitzer Buzzsaw for the show handle. Again, find the show where you get your podcast. If you can't find us, you're not trying hard enough. And I already do like that, just off of what I said there, because that already puts me one step off of last year's show. If you go back to the tape, because you did not think we would get that there would be a support nationally for scrapping of the conference champs as a bye. So we are there now on last year's show.
My position on it, but yes, we are there. So yeah.
No, I don't remember what your position was as your opinion. I'm saying you didn't think it would occur. I don't remember what your opinion was. I don't. You made.
For the two. I thought that they would keep it for the 2 year, this limited whatever this run was, but no, they were able to ditch it for year one of it.
Yeah, so. I don't remember what your opinion actually was, but I just find that funny that so we will get any new listeners. We will, generally speaking, whatever George predicts, the opposite will occur.
I didn't even predict anything here, so there you go.
Yeah, on this show you did not predict. Yeah, so we're just out front of last year's prediction here, coming off of now for the first show of this season, off of the end of last year's show, just off of that prediction. We already got one George prediction that already has been scrapped, so you're 0 for 1 off of the end.
I wasn't even a prediction. It's just like I don't even think that it was like, oh, well, they do it. Like I hope they do, but who knows? Yeah, type of thing. So
yeah, but we will see where your predictions are in the future. But yeah, that will do it for this episode of the show, and I'm sure we'll have much more college football here in the remaining months.
This has been another edition of the Howitzer and Buzzsaw Show, where we conquer preseason polls, convoluted systems, scheduling, and sports media.
One day at a time.